The black crepe dress rustled against the wooden platform as Martha Owens stepped down from the train. Her veil, so thick the harsh Nevada sun barely reached her eyes. She carried a single worn carpetbag and wore the full regalia of mourning, from her jet-black bonnet to the ebony ribbons trailing from her sleeves. A specter of grief arriving in Porterville on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Isaac Whitmore stood at the edge of the platform, hat in his weathered hands, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of his mail-order bride dressed head to toe in black. He had expected a woman ready for a new life, perhaps nervous but hopeful. Instead, death itself seemed to have traveled across the country to meet him. The telegram he had received 2 weeks prior said simply that she was coming as planned, nothing more, no explanation, no warning. Miss Owens. His voice carried across the platform, deep and uncertain. She turned toward him, and through the veil he could just make out the pale shape of her face. Mr. Whitmore. Her voice was steady but hollow, like an echo in an empty room. He approached slowly as if she might bolt like a startled mare. I did not expect. That is, I received your telegram, but... He gestured helplessly at her mourning attire. My brother died 3 weeks ago, Martha said flatly. Cholera took him in 2 days. He was my last living relative. I had already sold everything I owned to make this journey, and I had nowhere else to go. If the arrangement is no longer suitable to you, I will understand. Isaac studied her for a long moment. At 32, he had seen his share of hardship. His ranch was modest but profitable, and he had advertised for a wife because the loneliness of the Nevada high desert had become too much to bear. He had hoped for companionship, perhaps eventually affection. Looking at this woman draped in grief, he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. But something in the straight line of her shoulders, the way she held her head high despite her obvious pain, spoke to him of strength. The arrangement stands, he said quietly. I am sorry for your loss. We can wait to marry until your mourning period is over if that suits you better. For the first time, a crack appeared in her composure. Her gloved hand rose to her throat. You would do that, but we had an agreement. You need a wife. I need a partner, Isaac corrected gently. Not a woman forced to the altar while her heart is broken. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who keeps a room at the ranch. You can stay there, get your bearings, and we will marry when you are ready, if you are ever ready. Martha felt something shift in her chest, the first warmth she had felt in 3 weeks. That is unexpectedly kind. It is decent, Isaac said. There is a difference. He reached for her carpetbag. Come on. It is a 2-hour ride to the ranch. You must be exhausted. The wagon ride through the Nevada landscape was conducted mostly in silence. Martha watched the sagebrush and Joshua trees roll past, the Stillwater Range rising in the distance like the spine of some ancient sleeping beast. The September heat was dry and clean, so different from the humid air of Missouri where she had spent her life. Isaac pointed out landmarks occasionally. The Millers spread to the south, the creek that ran year-round and served as the boundary of his property, the old Paiute trail that cut through the valley. How much land do you work? Martha asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity. 800 acres. I run about 300 head of cattle plus horses. I have 2 hands who work full-time, brothers named Jim and Frank Cassidy. Good men. They live in the bunkhouse near the barn. And Mrs. Chen, her husband worked for me 5 years ago. He was killed when a horse rolled on him during a storm. She had nowhere to go, so I offered her the housekeeper position. She is a fine cook and keeps the place running smooth. You will like her. Martha nodded, filing away this information. She found herself studying Isaac from the corner of her eye. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and deep lines around his eyes from squinting against the desert glare. His hair was the color of wheat, streaked with early silver at the temples, and his hands on the reins were capable and sure. He was not a handsome man in the classical sense, but there was something solid about him, something dependable. The Whitmore ranch appeared as they crested a low rise. The main house was a sprawling single-story structure built of whitewashed adobe with a wide porch wrapped around three sides. Several outbuildings clustered nearby: a barn, a bunkhouse, a stable, and what appeared to be a chicken coop. Cottonwood trees grew along the creek that Isaac had mentioned, their leaves shimmering silver green in the afternoon light. A small woman emerged from the house as the wagon approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was Chinese, perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and assessing as she looked at Martha. "Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Owens," Isaac said, helping Martha down from the wagon. "She will be staying in the East Room. She has had some recent grief and will need time before we proceed with any wedding plans." Mrs. Chen's expression softened immediately. She stepped forward and took Martha's hands in her own weathered ones. "You are welcome here. Come, I will show you to your room. You must be tired and hungry." Martha felt tears prick at her eyes, the first since she had left Missouri. The simple kindness was almost too much to bear. "Thank you." The East Room was small but comfortable, with whitewashed walls and a window that looked out over the creek. A quilt in shades of blue and cream covered the bed, and a simple dresser stood against one wall. It was more than Martha had expected, certainly better than she had feared. "I will bring you water to wash," Mrs. Chen said. "Supper is in an hour. Do not feel you must join us if you are too tired." "I will come," Martha said. "I should start as I mean to go on." Mrs. Chen smiled. "You are stronger than you look. That is good. You will need strength here." After the older woman left, Martha removed her bonnet and veil, catching sight of herself in the small mirror above the dresser. She looked pale and drawn, her dark hair pulled back severely, shadows like bruises under her gray eyes. At 24, she felt ancient. Thomas, her brother, had been only 19. He had been planning to accompany her west, to start fresh in a new territory. Instead, she had buried him in the plot next to their parents and traveled alone. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, the cool water reviving her somewhat. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and let herself simply breathe for the first time in weeks. She had made it. She was here. Whatever came next, at least she was no longer alone. Supper was served at a long table on the back porch, where the evening breeze brought relief from the day's heat. Isaac and Martha were joined by Mrs. Chen and the two ranch hands, Jim and Frank Cassidy. The brothers were in their 20s, freckled and red-haired, with easy smiles and the broad shoulders of men who made their living through physical labor. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Owens," Jim said, the older of the two. "Welcome to the Whitmore Ranch." "Thank you," Martha said quietly. The meal was simple but delicious. Roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and green beans from the kitchen garden. Martha found she was hungrier than she had realized, and she ate steadily while the conversation flowed around her. The men discussed the work planned for the coming week, the state of the north pasture fence, a mountain lion that had been spotted near the creek. "We will need to keep the calves closer to the barn," Isaac said. "Jim, you and Frank take turns on night watch until we are sure the cat has moved on." "Yes, sir," Jim said. Martha listened, learning the rhythms of this new life. After supper, the men retired to the bunkhouse while Mrs. Chen began clearing the table. Martha stood to help, but the housekeeper waved her away. "Not tonight. You need rest. Tomorrow you can help if you wish." Isaac walked Martha to her room, his boots echoing on the wooden floor, At her door, he paused. "If you need anything, my room is at the other end of the house. Mrs. Chen's is between, so you need not worry about propriety." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." "Isaac," he corrected. "We need not be so formal." "Isaac, then, and you should call me Martha," he nodded, then hesitated. "I meant what I said at the station. There is no rush. Take the time you need." After he left, Martha changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed. The sounds of the ranch were foreign to her. The distant lowing of cattle, the creek's gentle murmur, an owl hooting in the cottonwoods. But beneath the strangeness there was peace. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something other than despair. It was small, fragile as a candle flame, but it was there. Hope. The days fell into a pattern. Martha rose early and helped Mrs. Chen with the household work. She learned to make bread, to tend the kitchen garden, to preserve vegetables for the coming winter. The physical labor was exhausting, but satisfying in a way her previous life as a seamstress had never been. In Missouri, she had spent her days hunched over a sewing machine in a cramped room, working until her eyes burned and her fingers ached. Here, the work was hard but honest, and she could see the results of her efforts. Isaac was patient and respectful, keeping a careful distance. In the evenings, after supper, they would sometimes sit on the porch together, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Their conversations were tentative at first, circling around safe topics. The weather, the ranch, the town of Porterville. But gradually, Martha found herself opening up, telling him about her life in Missouri, about Thomas and their childhood, about the cholera epidemic that had swept through their neighborhood like a scythe. "He wanted to be a teacher," she said one evening, 3 weeks after her arrival. "He was so bright, always reading. When I decided to answer your advertisement, he insisted on coming with me. He said it would be an adventure." Her voice cracked. "He died thinking he had ruined my chance at a new life. I could not make him understand that none of it mattered without him." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "I had a brother too," he finally said. "Daniel. He was killed in the war at Gettysburg. I was 21 and I felt like the world had ended. My mother never recovered. She died the following winter, and people said it was pneumonia, but I think she just gave up. I understand the weight of that kind of loss." Martha turned to look at him, really look at him for the first time. "Is that why you came west?" "Partly. After my mother died, there was nothing left for me in Ohio. My father had passed when I was 15. I wanted to go somewhere where every corner did not hold a memory. I worked as a ranch hand in Texas for a few years, saved my money, and came to Nevada when I heard they were opening up land for homesteading. That was 8 years ago. Do you regret it? Not for a moment. This land, it has a way of healing you. It is hard and unforgiving, but it is honest. There is something clean about it." Martha nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand what he meant. The desert had a stark beauty that matched her grief, acknowledged it without trying to soften or hide it. As October arrived, the days grew shorter and cooler. Martha still wore her mourning clothes, but she had begun to put aside the veil except when she went into town. She accompanied Isaac to Porterville twice for supplies, riding in the wagon beside him. The town was small, just a main street lined with false-fronted buildings. A general store, a saloon, a church, a smithy, a small hotel. People stared at her mourning dress with curiosity and pity, but no one was unkind. At the general store, she met several of the local women. Mrs. Sarah Miller, whose family owned the neighboring ranch to the south, was particularly welcoming. She was a sturdy woman in her 40s with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. "You are the mail-order bride," she said without preamble. "I heard you had arrived. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Martha said, surprised by the directness. "If you need anything, anything at all, you send word. We women have to look out for each other out here. The Lord knows the land will not." Martha found herself warming to the older woman. "That is kind of you, not kind. Practical. Isaac Whitmore is a good man. You could have done far worse. Give yourself time to heal and then make a life with him. It is what your brother would have wanted." The words stayed with Martha long after they returned to the ranch. That night, lying in bed, she thought about Thomas and what he would say if he could see her now. He had always been practical, even in his idealism. He would tell her that grief was natural, but that life was for living. He would want her to be happy. The next morning she found Isaac in the barn, mending a bridle. The smell of leather and hay was sharp and pleasant. "Isaac, I have been thinking." He looked up, his blue eyes steady. "About what?" "About the wedding, about us. I think I am ready. Or at least as ready as I will ever be." Isaac set down the bridle carefully. "Martha, you do not have to rush. I told you I would wait." "I know. But I have been in mourning for 6 weeks now. I will carry Thomas in my heart for the rest of my life, but I cannot spend that life frozen in grief. He would not want that, and you have been so patient, so kind. You deserve an answer." "And the answer is yes." Martha took a deep breath. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Whitmore, but I need you to understand something first. I care for you, I respect you, but I do not love you, not yet. Maybe not ever. I will be a good wife to you. I will work hard and be faithful and do everything I can to make this ranch a home, but I cannot promise you my heart." Isaac stood and walked over to her, stopping just close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Martha, I do not need promises. I need honesty, and you have given me that. As for love, well, maybe it will come in time. Maybe it will not. But I have been alone for a long time, and I would rather spend my days with someone I respect and admire than wait for some grand passion that may never arrive. If you are willing to try, then so am I." She felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you. There is one more thing," Isaac said. "I know you are still in mourning, and I understand if you want to wait to wear white. We can have a simple ceremony, just the reverend and a few witnesses. You can wear what you feel comfortable in." Martha considered this. The thought of wearing white, of celebrating while Thomas lay cold in the ground, made her stomach turn. But at the same time, she was tired of the black crepe, tired of being swathed in grief. "Could I wear gray?" "It is still mourning, but lighter. Half mourning, they call it. You can wear whatever you like. This is your wedding, too." They set the date for the first Saturday in November, giving Martha time to sew a new dress. She chose a gray silk that Isaac purchased for her in Porterville, and she worked on it in the evenings by lamplight. Mrs. Chen helped her with the more difficult seams, and slowly the dress took shape. It was simple, with a high neck and long sleeves, but the fabric had a subtle sheen that caught the light beautifully. As the wedding day approached, Martha found her feelings about Isaac becoming more complex. She watched him work with the cattle, patient and firm, his voice calm even when the animals were skittish. She noticed the way he always thanked Mrs. Chen for meals, the way he treated the Cassidy brothers with respect, the way he handled his horses with gentle confidence. He was, she realized, a genuinely good man. And goodness, she was learning, was far more valuable than the romantic passion the novels she had read in Missouri promised. The night before the wedding, Sarah Miller came to visit, bringing with her a crown of dried wildflowers. "For your hair," she said, pressing it into Martha's hands. "I know you are in mourning, but even grief should not rob you of all beauty on your wedding day." Martha held the delicate crown, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know if I deserve this, to be happy when Thomas is dead." Sarah pulled her into a firm embrace. "Child, you deserve every bit of happiness you can grab in this life. Your brother would not want you to suffer forever in his name. That is not love. That is just waste." The wedding took place at noon on a bright November day, cold but clear. The small church in Porterville was filled with what seemed like half the county. Martha had not realized how many people would come, drawn by curiosity about the mail-order bride and affection for Isaac. She wore her gray silk dress and the crown of wildflowers, and if her hands trembled as Isaac slipped a simple gold band on her finger, no one mentioned it. Reverend John Patterson spoke about commitment and faith, about building a life together through the good times and the bad. Martha listened to the words as if from a great distance, aware of Isaac standing beside her, solid and steady. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac leaned down and kissed her gently on the cheek, a gesture that was respectful rather than passionate. The reception was held at the Miller Ranch, where tables had been set up outside and the women had prepared a feast. There was music and dancing, and Martha found herself swept into the celebration despite her gray dress. Isaac danced with her once, his hand warm on her waist, and she was surprised to find he was graceful despite his size. "You are a good dancer," she said. "My mother insisted I learn. She said any man worth his salt should know how to dance." She was right. As the sun began to set, Isaac suggested they head home. The ranch was theirs now, truly theirs together. Martha felt a flutter of nervousness as they said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon. The physical aspect of marriage had been explained to her in clinical terms by a married friend before she left Missouri, but knowing about something and experiencing it were vastly different things. Isaac seemed to sense her anxiety. As they rode through the gathering dusk, he said quietly, "Martha, I want you to know that I will not rush you. We are married now, yes, but that does not mean you owe me anything you are not ready to give. We can take things as slowly as you need." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. I am just nervous. It is all so new." "I know. It is new for me too. I have never been married before either." When they arrived at the ranch, Mrs. Chen had already retired to her room, leaving a lamp burning low in the main room. Isaac showed Martha to what was now their bedroom, a large space at the south end of the house that she had not entered before. It was simply furnished with a large bed, a wardrobe, a dresser, and a washstand. Someone had placed wildflowers in a vase on the dresser. "I will give you privacy to change," Isaac said. "I need to check on the animals anyway. Take your time." After he left, Martha changed into the nightgown Mrs. Chen had made for her as a wedding gift. It was white cotton, simple but well made, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She brushed out her dark hair and braided it loosely, then sat on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding. When Isaac returned, he had changed into clean trousers and a shirt. He moved quietly, as if trying not to startle her. "May I sit?" She nodded, and he sat beside her, leaving space between them. For a long moment they simply sat in silence. "I have been thinking about what you said," Isaac finally spoke. "About not being able to promise your heart. I want you to know that I understand. But I also want you to know that I am going to try to earn it. Not through grand gestures or pretty words, but through the small things. Through showing up every day and being the kind of man you can lean on. And maybe, someday, you will find that you do love me. Or maybe you will not. But either way, we will build something good here. I believe that." Martha turned to look at him, this man who was now her husband. In the lamplight, his face was kind and serious. "I think I could learn to love you," she said softly. "I think perhaps I am already starting to." "Then that is enough." He reached out and took her hand, and she let him. They sat like that for a while, hand in hand, before Isaac kissed her gently. It was tentative and sweet, and Martha found herself responding, leaning into him. The nervousness did not disappear entirely, but it was joined by something else, curiosity, and beneath that, a flicker of desire. What followed was tender and careful. Isaac was patient, making sure she was comfortable, checking in with her frequently. And while it was awkward at times, as first times often are, there was also a surprising intimacy to it, a vulnerability that Martha had not expected. Afterwards, lying in Isaac's arms in the darkness, she felt something settle in her chest. Not quite happiness, not yet, but peace. And maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of hope. The winter months were hard but satisfying. The ranch work continued regardless of the weather, and Martha learned to appreciate the rhythms of the land. She helped Mrs. Chen with the never-ending domestic tasks, but Isaac also began teaching her about the ranch itself. She learned to ride properly, graduating from the gentle mare she had started with to a spirited young horse named Dancer. She learned to identify which cattle needed extra feed, which calves were thriving and which needed attention. She learned to read the sky for coming weather, to understand the patterns of wind and cloud that meant snow or clear skies. And slowly, quietly, she fell in love with her husband. It was not a sudden thing, not a lightning bolt or a rush of passion. It was gradual, built from 1,000 small moments. The way Isaac always made sure she had the best cut of meat at dinner. The way he listened when she talked about Thomas, never trying to rush her grief or minimize it. The way he laughed at her jokes, a deep rumbling sound that made her want to hear it again and again. The way he touched her with reverence and care, learning what pleased her and taking joy in her pleasure. By the time spring arrived, Martha realized she could no longer imagine her life without him. The thought of Isaac not being there, of waking up alone or eating dinner in silence or spending her days without his steady presence, was unbearable. She loved him. Not despite the arrangement that had brought them together, but because of the life they had built from it. It was mid-April, with the desert blooming in unexpected riots of color, when she finally told him. They were riding out to check the northern fence line, just the two of them, enjoying the warm sun and the sweet smell of sage. Isaac had been telling her a story about one of the Cassidy brothers trying to impress a girl in town, making her laugh, when Martha suddenly reined in her horse. "Isaac, wait," he stopped, concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. I just need to tell you something." She took a deep breath. "I love you. I did not think I could, did not think my heart had room for anything but grief, but you made room. You were patient and kind, and you never demanded anything I could not give. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, completely and utterly in love with you." Isaac's face went through several expressions at once: surprise, disbelief, and finally joy. He dismounted quickly and came to her side, helping her down from her horse and pulling her into his arms. "Martha, I have loved you since you stepped off that train in your black dress, looking so brave and broken. I love you for your strength, for your humor, for the way you have made this house a home. I love you for trying, for not giving up even when everything in you must have wanted to. I love you, and I will love you for the rest of my life." They kissed there in the middle of the desert, surrounded by wildflowers and sage, the horses cropping grass nearby and the sky an endless blue overhead. And Martha felt something break open inside her, not painfully, but like a flower unfurling. The grief would always be there, a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She was Martha Whitmore now, beloved wife, partner in this ranch, this life. She was more than her mourning clothes. That evening, Martha did something she had been thinking about for weeks. She took her black mourning dress, the one she had worn on the train, and carefully folded it away in the trunk at the foot of the bed. She would keep it, as a reminder of where she had come from and what she had survived, but she would not wear it again. Instead, the next time they went to Porterville, she asked Isaac to buy her fabric for a new dress. Not gray this time, but white. cream-colored linen with tiny flowers embroidered at the cuffs. When Mrs. Chen saw what she was making, the older woman smiled. "White is for new beginnings," she said approvingly. "Yes," Martha agreed. "It is." The dress was finished by the end of May, and Martha wore it to church the following Sunday. She felt self-conscious at first, aware that everyone in town knew she had been in mourning. But Sarah Miller caught her eye and gave her an approving nod, and Martha relaxed. She was allowed to move forward. Thomas would understand. Summer came to the Nevada high desert with blazing heat and long, golden evenings. The ranch prospered. The cattle were healthy, the foals born that spring were strong, and the summer rains came right on schedule. Martha worked beside Isaac and Mrs. Chen and the Cassidy brothers, her hands growing calloused and strong, her skin tanning despite her bonnet. In July, she realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice and was experiencing morning sickness that Mrs. Chen recognized immediately. When she told Isaac, he whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around before setting her down quickly and apologizing for jostling her. "Are you happy?" she asked, laughing at his expression. "Happy, Martha, I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby, our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Martha continued to work, though Isaac and Mrs. Chen both fussed over her, trying to make her rest more than she wanted. By the time autumn arrived, she was visibly showing, and she had to let out all her dresses. The baby was active, kicking and rolling, and Martha would sometimes just sit with her hands on her belly, marveling at the life growing inside her. Isaac was constantly concerned, wanting to make sure she was comfortable and healthy. He built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Mrs. Chen sewed tiny gowns and blankets. Sarah Miller brought by baby clothes her own children had outgrown, presenting them with the practical generosity that characterized all her interactions. "First babies are always an adventure," she told Martha. "You send Isaac to fetch me when your time comes. I have helped birth more babies than I can count." The baby came in early March of 1877, during a late winter storm. Martha's labor started in the afternoon, and Isaac rode through the driving snow to fetch Sarah while Mrs. Chen stayed with Martha, timing the contractions and offering encouragement. By the time Isaac returned with Sarah, Martha was deep in the throes of labor, gripping Mrs. Chen's hand and trying not to scream. Sarah took charge with calm efficiency. "First babies take their time. You are doing fine, Martha. Just breathe through it." The labor lasted through the night and into the morning. It was the hardest thing Martha had ever done. Harder than leaving Missouri. Harder than burying Thomas. Harder than learning to build a life in an unforgiving land. But finally, as the storm cleared and pale sunlight streamed through the window, she gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. "A boy," Sarah announced, placing the squalling infant on Martha's chest. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Martha looked down at her son, his red face and dark hair, his tiny fists waving angrily at being thrust into the cold world, and felt her heart expand impossibly larger. Isaac stood beside the bed, tears streaming down his face, reaching out to touch the baby's head with one gentle finger. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered. "Martha, he is perfect." They named him Thomas Isaac Whitmore after the brother Martha had lost and the father he would know. Little Thomas was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Isaac was a devoted father, taking his son with him on his rounds when Martha needed to rest, carrying Thomas in a sling Mrs. Chen fashioned. The Cassidy brothers were endlessly entertained by the baby, competing to make him smile. Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm, one that revolved around the tiny person who had joined their family. Martha had never known she could love anything as much as she loved her son. But she also loved watching Isaac with him, seeing this tough cowboy reduced to helpless adoration by a 6-pound infant. One evening in late spring, when Thomas was about 2 months old, Martha stood on the porch watching the sunset. Isaac came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. Their son was asleep in the cradle inside, and for a moment everything was peaceful. "I have been thinking," Martha said. "About what?" "About that day I arrived at the train station, dressed all in black. I was so lost, Isaac, so certain that my life was over, and you gave me hope. You did not try to fix me or rush me or demand that I pretend to be something I was not. You just gave me space to heal and time to find my way back to life. You gave me reasons to wear white again." Isaac tightened his arms around her. "You did the hard work. I just held the door open. No, it was more than that. You showed me what love could be. Not the wild passion of novels, but something better. Something solid and real and lasting. You showed me that I could build a new life without forgetting the old one, that I could honor Thomas's memory while still moving forward. He would be proud of you, of everything you have become." "I hope so." Martha turned in Isaac's arms to face him. "I love you. I do not think I say it enough, but I love you more than I ever thought possible. You and Thomas, you are my whole world. And you are ours," Isaac said, kissing her softly. "You and that fierce heart of yours that refused to break even when it had every reason to. I am the luckiest man alive." They stood together as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Inside, their son slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams babies dream. And Martha, who had arrived in Nevada shrouded in black crepe and grief, felt nothing but gratitude for the life she had found. The years passed in the swift way that years do when life is full. Little Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler and then a curious boy, following his father around the ranch and asking endless questions. 2 years after Thomas was born, Martha gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Amelia, a delicate girl with her mother's gray eyes and her father's wheat-colored hair. And 2 years after that, another son arrived, whom they named Daniel James after Isaac's brother and Jim Cassidy, who had helped deliver the baby when Sarah could not get there in time. The ranch continued to prosper. Isaac's herd grew, and he was able to buy more land, expanding their holdings. The Cassidy brothers stayed on, becoming not just employees but family. Jim eventually married a schoolteacher from Porterville, and they built a house on the far end of the Whitmore property. Frank remained a bachelor, claiming he was married to the ranch, but everyone knew he was sweet on the widow who ran the boarding house in town. Mrs. Chen stayed as well, growing older but never less capable. She doted on the children, teaching them to cook and garden and speak a few words of Chinese. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68, the whole family mourned her as the beloved grandmother she had become. Sarah Miller remained a close friend and confidant. Her children and Martha's grew up together, running wild across the Nevada high desert, learning to ride and rope and read the land. The community of ranchers supported each other through droughts and hard winters, through losses and celebrations. It was a hard life, but it was a good one. As the children grew older, Martha sometimes took out the black mourning dress from the trunk and showed it to them, telling them about their Uncle Thomas and the journey that had brought her to Nevada. She wanted them to understand that grief was not weakness, that it was possible to honor loss while still embracing joy. "Your uncle would have loved you all so much," she told them. "He had the biggest heart of anyone I ever knew until I met your father. In a way, he brought us together. My journey to find him was what led me here. Young Thomas, who at 10 years old was already showing signs of his uncle's love of learning, asked, "Do you still miss him?" "Every day," Martha said honestly, "but it does not hurt the way it used to. Now when I think of him, I remember the good times. I remember his laugh and his dreams and the way he always believed things would work out, and I try to live in a way that would make him proud." Isaac, listening from the doorway, came in and put his arms around his wife. "She does make him proud. She makes us all proud." The children grew and eventually began lives of their own. Thomas went to university in California, studying to become a teacher like his uncle had dreamed of being. Rose surprised everyone by becoming a skilled horsewoman and rancher, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Isaac grew older. Daniel joined the railroad, helping to expand the networks that connected the West. Through it all, Martha and Isaac remained devoted to each other. Their love, which had begun in such uncertain circumstances, had deepened and matured into something unshakable. They had built a life together from grief and hope, from patience and hard work, from countless small acts of kindness and understanding. One evening in the summer of 1899, Isaac and Martha sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 50s now, their hair graying, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But Martha still felt a flutter in her chest when Isaac took her hand, and he still looked at her with the same devotion he had shown on their wedding day. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked. "Answering that advertisement, coming all this way to marry a stranger?" Martha looked at the land spread before them, golden in the dying light. She thought about their children, scattered now but still close, about the life they had built, about the love she had never expected to find. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You gave me everything, Isaac. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me reasons to live again when I thought I had none. You gave me reasons to wear white again." "You did the same for me," Isaac said. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You made this place a home. You made my life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The desert night was cool and clear, filled with the sounds they had learned to love: cattle lowing in the distance, the creek murmuring its endless song, an owl calling from the cottonwoods. 22 years, Martha said softly. 22 years since I stepped off that train in my mourning clothes, terrified and grieving and so alone. And look at you now, Isaac said with a smile. Strong and beautiful and surrounded by love. You took that grief and turned it into something amazing. You built a legacy, Martha. Our children, this ranch, the life we have created together, that is your triumph. Our triumph, Martha corrected. I could not have done any of it without you. You were patient when I needed patience, strong when I needed strength, and loving when I needed love. You never tried to erase my grief or make me forget Thomas. You just helped me carry it until it grew lighter. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Isaac raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, as long as it led me here to this porch with you. As summer turned to fall and then to winter, the rhythm of ranch life continued. Martha still worked hard, though Rose did more of the physical labor now. She spent her time managing the household, tending an ever-expanding garden, and helping Sarah Miller organize church socials and community gatherings. She had become a pillar of the Porterville community, known for her kindness and practical wisdom. The 20th century arrived with both excitement and trepidation. The world was changing rapidly, with new technologies and ideas sweeping across even isolated places like Nevada. But on the Whitmore Ranch, some things remained constant: the land, the cattle, the bonds of family and love. In the spring of 1902, Thomas returned from California with a wife, a bright young woman named Elizabeth who shared his passion for education. They settled in Porterville, where Thomas took a position at the school. Rose, now 23, had become engaged to a neighboring rancher's son, a solid young man who respected her independence and skills. Daniel was working his way up in the railroad company, visiting when he could and filling his letters with tales of the places he had seen. At Christmas that year, with all their children home and the house filled with laughter and love, Martha looked around the dinner table and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She caught Isaac's eye across the table, and he winked at her, understanding as he always did exactly what she was feeling. After dinner, Martha excused herself and went to the bedroom. She opened the old trunk at the foot of the bed and pulled out the black morning dress she had worn so long ago. The fabric was still in good condition, carefully preserved, but it smelled of age and cedar. She held it up, remembering the young woman who had worn it, so broken and afraid. She was not that woman anymore. She had grieved and healed and built a beautiful life from the ashes of her loss. Thomas, her beloved brother, would always be a part of her, but he was not all of her. She was Martha Whitmore now, wife and mother and rancher, beloved and cherished and whole. Making a decision, Martha folded the dress carefully and wrapped it in clean muslin. She would give it to Rose, along with the story of how she had come to Nevada. It was part of her history, part of her family's history, and it deserved to be preserved. But she no longer needed to keep it hidden away. The grief it represented had been transformed into something else: wisdom, compassion, and a deep appreciation for the preciousness of life and love. When she returned to the parlor, Isaac looked up from his conversation with their sons. "Everything all right? Everything is perfect," Martha said, settling into the chair beside him and taking his hand. "Absolutely perfect." The years continued to roll by, bringing both joys and sorrows as all years do. Sarah Miller passed away peacefully in her sleep at 72, and Martha mourned her friend while celebrating the full, generous life she had lived. Jim Cassidy retired from ranch work, and he and his wife moved to town, though they visited often. Frank finally married the widow from the boarding house, surprising everyone and delighting the couple with his devotion. Martha and Isaac became grandparents several times over. Thomas and Elizabeth had 3 children. Rose and her husband had 4. Daniel eventually married and settled down, adding 2 more grandchildren to the growing family. The ranch house that had once seemed so large now felt cramped during holidays when everyone came home, filled with the noise and chaos and joy of multiple generations. Through it all, Martha and Isaac's love remained the bedrock of the family. They had their disagreements, certainly, and there were hard times when money was tight or cattle prices dropped or the weather turned against them. But they faced everything together, as partners in the truest sense. Their marriage was a testament to what could be built from honesty, respect, patience, and the willingness to show up every single day and do the work of loving each other. One afternoon, in the autumn of 1910, Martha was working in her garden when she felt a sudden sharp pain in her chest. She sat down quickly on the bench Isaac had built for her, pressing her hand to her breastbone and trying to catch her breath. The pain eased after a moment, and she dismissed it as indigestion. But it happened again a few days later and then again. She did not tell Isaac at first, not wanting to worry him, but he noticed anyway, as he always noticed everything about her. "You are not well," he said one evening, his voice tight with concern. "I am taking you to see Dr. Morrison tomorrow." Dr. Morrison, who had delivered most of their grandchildren and seen them through countless illnesses and injuries, examined Martha thoroughly. Afterwards, he sat across from them in his office, his expression grave. "Your heart is not as strong as it should be, Martha," he said gently. "This can happen as we age, and there is no cure for it. You will need to slow down, avoid strenuous activity, and be careful not to overexert yourself." "For how long?" Martha asked. The doctor hesitated. "For the rest of your life." "And Martha, I need you to understand that while you can manage this condition, it is serious. You need to listen to your body and rest when you need to rest." Isaac was pale but composed as they drove home. Martha knew he was thinking about losing her, about being left alone. She reached over and took his hand. "It will be all right," she said, though she was not sure she believed it herself. "I cannot lose you," Isaac said roughly. "Martha, I cannot do this without you. You will not have to, not for a long time yet. I am tougher than I look. I have made it this far, have I not?" But they both knew things had changed. Martha did slow down, curtailing her activities and letting Rose and Elizabeth take over more of the household work. It frustrated her at first, having to rest when there was so much to be done. But gradually she adapted, finding new ways to contribute. She spent hours with her grandchildren, teaching them to read and telling them stories. She pieced quilts and wrote letters and tended the flowers that grew in pots on the porch. And she spent time with Isaac, more time than they had had in years. They would sit together for hours, talking or simply being quiet in each other's presence. These moments became precious beyond measure, each day a gift they did not take for granted. One evening in the spring of 1912, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Martha said, "If I could go back and talk to that frightened girl in the black dress, do you know what I would tell her?" "What?" Isaac asked, his arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "I would tell her that the grief she feels is real and valid, but it is not the end of her story. I would tell her that she is about to meet a man who will teach her what love really means. I would tell her to be brave, to take chances, to say yes to life even when every part of her wants to shut down. I would tell her that 25 years from now, she will be sitting on a porch with that man, having built a beautiful life together, and she will be happier than she ever dreamed possible." Isaac kissed her temple. "I would go back and tell that lonely cowboy that his life is about to begin. That the woman stepping off the train is going to turn his empty house into a home and his lonely existence into a life worth living. I would tell him to be patient, to be kind, and to never, ever take her for granted." "You never did," Martha said softly. "Not once in all these years did you take me for granted. You made me feel cherished every single day." "It was easy," Isaac said. "You are the most cherished woman in the world." They sat together as the light faded and the stars emerged, comfortable in the silence, secure in their love. And Martha thought about all the paths her life might have taken, all the choices she might have made differently. But she would not change a thing. Every sorrow, every struggle, every moment of doubt had led her here, to this place, to this man, to this life. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Martha lived for another 3 years, her heart growing weaker but her spirit remaining strong. She saw Rose's youngest child born, held him in her arms, and marveled at the continuation of life, the way love extended forward through generations. She celebrated her and Isaac's 38th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, feeling blessed beyond measure. When the end came in the summer of 1915, it was peaceful. She simply did not wake up one morning, passing from sleep to death so gently that Isaac, lying beside her, did not realize she was gone until he tried to wake her for breakfast. He held her for a long time, this woman who had been his partner and his love for nearly 4 decades, crying for the first time since he could remember. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire county. Martha had touched countless lives with her quiet kindness and steady strength. The church overflowed, and people stood outside to pay their respects. She was buried in the Porterville Cemetery, in a plot beside the space reserved for Isaac, under a cottonwood tree that whispered in the breeze. Isaac stood at her gravestone after everyone else had left, reading the inscription they had chosen together years before: Martha Owens Whitmore, 1853–1915. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she wore white again. "I will be with you soon, my love," he whispered. "Wait for me." He lived for 2 more years, cared for by Rose and her family, who moved into the ranch house to be with him. He still worked when he could, though his body was failing. He spent hours on the porch where he and Martha had passed so many evenings, talking to her as if she were still there. And perhaps in some way she was. When Isaac died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1917, at the age of 75, Rose found a letter on his bedside table. It was addressed to Martha, written the night before he died. "My dearest Martha, I do not know if you can read this where you are, but I hope somehow you know what is in my heart. You were the greatest blessing of my life. You took a lonely cowboy and made him a husband, a father, a man worth being. You took grief and turned it into grace. You took mourning clothes and turned them into wedding white, not by forgetting what you had lost, but by being brave enough to embrace what you might find. I have loved you from the moment I saw you step off that train, and I will love you beyond this life and into whatever comes next. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for every moment, every laugh, every tear, every sunrise and sunset we shared. Wait for me, my love. I am coming home. Yours forever, Isaac." They buried him beside Martha under the cottonwood tree, and his headstone read, "Isaac James Whitmore, 1842–1917. Beloved husband, father, and grandfather." He gave her reasons to wear white again. The ranch stayed in the family, passing to Rose and eventually to her children and grandchildren. The story of Martha and Isaac became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The black mourning dress was preserved as a family heirloom, along with the cream-colored dress with flowers embroidered at the cuffs. Together they told the story of grief and healing, of loss and love found. And on quiet evenings when the desert air was soft and the stars were bright, people swore they could sometimes see 2 figures sitting on the old ranch house porch, hand in hand, watching the sunset together for all eternity. Whether it was truth or fancy did not matter. What mattered was the legacy they had left behind. A love that had transformed pain into beauty, mourning into joy, black crepe into wedding white. Their story became a reminder that it is possible to honor grief while still embracing life, to remember those we have lost while building futures with those we find. That love, real love, is not about grand passion or perfect circumstances. It is about showing up, being patient, doing the work day after day of truly seeing and honoring another person. It is about giving someone reasons to hope again, to live again, to love again. Martha had arrived in Nevada broken and grieving, wrapped in black and certain her life was over. But Isaac had seen beyond the mourning clothes to the strong, resilient woman beneath. He had given her space to heal, time to grow, and a love so steady and true that it had sustained her for nearly 4 decades. Together, they had built something beautiful from the most unlikely of beginnings. And in the end, that black dress in the trunk was not a symbol of death, but of transformation. It marked the beginning of a journey from darkness into light, from despair into hope, from mourning into joy. It was a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is the possibility of redemption, of new beginnings, of wearing white again. The Whitmore Ranch stood for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear, hope over despair, and partnership over solitude. And though Martha and Isaac were long gone, their love story lived on, inspiring their descendants to be brave, to take chances, to believe that even in grief there are reasons to embrace life again. Because sometimes the greatest love stories do not begin with love at all. Sometimes they begin with loss and loneliness, with practical arrangements and cautious hope. But if you are brave enough to stay, patient enough to wait, and open enough to let someone in, those stories can become the most beautiful of all. Martha Owens stepped off a train in mourning clothes, her heart shattered, her future uncertain. But Isaac Whitmore saw her potential, her strength, her worth. And together they wrote a love story for the ages, proving that it is never too late to start again, never too broken to be healed, never too lost to find your way home. And that, in the end, is what matters most. Not how we begin, but how we choose to continue. Not the mourning clothes we wear in our darkest moments, but the reasons we find to wear white again.